From sketching punks in the 80s to painting with bamboo skewers and garden twigs, Scott Tetlow's artistic journey has been anything but conventional. Born in Rochdale, Scott's early love for drawing led him to Cheltenham University, but a devastating studio fire in 2002 put his creative path on pause. It wasn't until a chance move to Verona, into an apartment above an art shop no less, that his passion reignited. Today, Scott's work blends the raw energy of calligraphy with the fluid grace of the human form. His expressive lines feel alive, each mark a reflection of the moment, the mood, the movement. We sat down with Scott to talk about his tools, studio rituals, and the beautiful chaos behind his process. He also shares some advice for emerging artists and reflects on the tightrope walk of putting soul to paper.
I've always been drawing ever since I was a child. I've always been into it really. I think because I had dyslexia in them days, so I always drew with pens. When I was supposed to be writing, I was always drawing. When I got into teens, I was doing flyers for people's bands, record covers, all kind of things. And then I was roadieing for bands when I left school, and we had lots of time in between gigs, so I used to draw on beer mats, draw the punks, draw all the different kinds of people hanging around in the places. One day somebody said, why don't you take these down to the art college and show somebody? And I took them down and I started at Rochdale foundation course, and that's how I began really. I've always done figurative work. I've always drawn people, but when I was at university, I got into the London School of Art, sort of Lucian Freud, Frank Arbach, Bacon, David Bomberg, that gang of artists. It was them who actually got me to really study figurative art really, because they talk about trying to capture a raw truth about a person, capture it in the marks, the way Frank Arbach could try and capture a figure under the paint. And they talk about how they'd go into the National Gallery into London and look at the Renaissance paintings. And I think it was Bacon talking, he'd go in and he'd get close up to the paintings and look at how much paint was on the brush, how dry the paint was, and even mimic how fast the movement of the marks must have been, and then you step back from this Rembrandt and it's this incredible, there's something alive in these paintings now. And that's what I'd do. I'd go down there, read my Francis Bacon book, Brutality of Fact, which I always have with me. It's kind of my figurative Bible in a way. I always go back to this if I need some inspiration. And that's what I'd do, is I'd go and I'd look at a brush mark and I'd try and think of the moment that he actually put that brush mark on, how dry with the paint is. And sometimes I'd even look for the bristle marks within the paint as well. So you'd really try and imagine what brush he was using, how thick the paint was, and how fast he did the movement. And then you'd step back and see the effect it had. And that was it really. I just studied drawing and painting. When I spent over a year in Taiwan, and I got interested in calligraphy, and I was sketching there and drawing and using inks. I did take some classes, thinking it was going to be a lot freer, but I was not a very good student really. I was pretty terrible at it, but I learned a lot from how they used the brushes and the marks, and drawing it using the end of the brush. My time in Verona was an interesting time. That was a time, up until that point, I'd not painted or drawn for 12 years, I think. And that's where my love for art got back, really. I'd go out sketching the architecture in the evenings. I'd never really done any architectural drawings before. So I started approaching the architecture as there were people. So I was doing portraits of the buildings, really, because there's so much detail in the architecture. I found it nice it was good for me to get back into drawing again, because I was trying to describe the details and describe the forms really, and to get a feel of it. So I'm doing a portrait of a building rather instead of an analytical illustration of the architecture. The way I work is there is no pre-planning. I've never been one for sketchbooks. I've never been able to do that. It's just not in my character. I always have to do it straight off the bat. And it drives me crazy when students now have to, it's such an emphasis on the sketchbooks. And my daughter brings a sketchbook home and they've got to put all this annotation in about the work and it's how good does the sketchbook look? And I think to myself, if I was studying art now, it just put me off. I could not be able to do it like that, and I find that they pigeonhole it in a way. So when I work, I get into sort of the mood and I have to just work it out as I go along. And sometimes if they fail, then that piece goes on the floor and then another piece will go up and I keep working out. And that's just the way I work. Anything I can get my hands on. I probably prefer not to use expensive brushes because I kind of destroy them. So I tend to buy the cheapest brushes I can if I'm using brushes. But when I'm drawing, I use my fingers. When I go out into the garden, I'll find an interesting looking stick. I'll use that. I use nib pens. The main one are the bamboo skewer sticks that you get for barbecuing. I use those a lot because there's a nice spring to them and because the bamboo has the lines in it and it just holds the ink really nice and I can move. Because when I'm working, I work stood up all the time and I stand at arm's length and have my work up against the wall. It's a funny one when I do have to do series of work because what I create in my art, I'll split it up into different sections. I do my commercial work and that is led by what's relatable to people on a commercial level. So I'll spend 3 days in the studio doing my commercial art and then I'll spend 2 days doing my own personal work and they bounce off each other, they inspire one another. When I thought I was going to become a commercial artist, I thought of how to cross over and bring my style so I would be comfortable and happy. I just adapted the subject matter to what I thought was relatable. The other 2 days I spend painting, doing abstract painting and figurative drawings, which I don't really care if they sell or not. They're completely for myself, they're personal pieces of work, which is quite funny because when I do have exhibitions and I put in a piece of work that I've poured my heart into, they don't sell, which is a tricky one. So it's always a funny game. So I do split my week up. You know, I do my own work and I do work that goes out into the world. I take inspiration from listening to people in the street, my family, friends, anybody. So they're all led by human observation and kind of like comical, really, light-hearted things. So I'll hear somebody say something. I think it's my brother who says all the time, "Oh, just crack on," and I'll do a piece on that, and it's relatable to a lot of people. I do a series of chimp pieces which are very popular. So, you know, the bonobo chimps is the closest thing to human behaviour and things that people say and do in society, so it's social commentary really. It's a social commentary on people, but there's not a portrait of a person. But other things, when I do inspiration from my other work, other kind of styles, sometimes I have no idea where it comes from. I tend to just put a piece of paper on the wall and just go for it really. I'll start with the abstract lines, make a few lines, and then I'll just see where it goes, to be honest. It's a funny thing because I've got a really good way of working now because I've worked in inks for such a long time now. You kind of like, you don't get a chance to, you know, rework things or rub things out. So it's almost like sometimes I feel like a tightrope walker with no sense of balance. You've just got to go for it. And sometimes and I mean, a lot of times the paper ends in the bin, but I'll take that paper and stick it on the wall and put another one up and then think, oh, I should have gone left there instead of right. And I'll take inspiration from that last piece that I did and then start again. So the work can inspire itself. So I never really think of the end product. It's not really important to me. It's just me, you know, the understanding and knowledge and enjoyment of the actual act of being creative, I think, that really is the joy for me. And also, from working with inks, what I've learned over the years, I've got a really good way of knowing when I've lost that momentum, say. It's almost like when you're sliding on ice in that moment when you think you're going to fall over, I stop working. So I'll work probably between 5 and 10 minutes non-stop. on the paper. And now I recognise when I'm kind of starting to trip up a little bit, so I down tools and I'll just go for a walk outside, walk in the garden, play my guitar, listen to a podcast, put some music on, make a cup of tea, and then I'll sit and look at it for a while, and I'll just wait until I kind of know which direction I want to go. Over the years, I've become pretty good at knowing that by making too many mistakes or falling over and the work being completely destroyed. So I tend to know now when to just step back from it. It's a funny thing, sometimes, you'll come in someday, and I think it was Picasso who said, creativity will find you when you're bored. It's a brilliant quote, if I can remember it. I call it my creative passenger that's with me, this, whatever it is in the ether. And you'll come in some days and he or she, whatever it is, this creative passenger that is gone. And you've just not got to get down on that, really. I think in those times where you think that's gone, I think that's when you start to find something new, when you think it's going bad. And I think at those times, that's when I don't do any figurative work or anything, I just down tools and I just play. And I'll play making marks and try and get lost in that and not think of the end product at all. It's completely irrelevant. And I think, for me anyway, at those points, I think that's when you learn a lot, really. He can just appear, you could be I'm not feeling it today, everything's going wrong, and you'll start working, and then you'll go in the next day and he's not there, and you'll go in the next day, it's not there, and then the next day, everything you do just seems to work. And that's when, at that point, I think, how long is he going to be around for? So that's when sometimes I'll just keep going, because I think any day now he might just disappear, so I'll work all the way through the night or something, because I know it just goes and comes, that kind of inspiration. But I think the most important thing is just to play when you're getting at a block. It's just to get some inks out or paints or whatever medium is, and just play and mix things up and just see what happens. It all depends on the piece. I wouldn't say there was any one thing that I work on one piece for one time, or sometimes I'll have several pieces going at the same time and I'll pick one off and bring that out of the drawer. But sometimes I'll just go straight onto one piece, then one piece, then one piece. And it just changes, really. It really does just change. Sometimes I could have 5 up, or, I could work like that for 2 weeks. And then, a week after I could be just doing one at a time. So it changes all the time. Now I have one side of my studio here, and this is where I do all my ink work, my drawings. And if you notice that the wall is painted black, and I paint the wall black because when I put my white sheet of paper on, it really helps me focus, because I know where the edges are. So it helps me see my composition. When I'm completely lost in the lines and drawing, I've done it before, and I've started drawing. When I used to do it on white walls, I end up like, I've drawn on the wall now, so it just helps me focus in. And I think when I was in Taiwan, I saw a sculptor. He was working in a room, and he was working on a sculpture for a temple. And he had one beam of light that came down onto it, so he was completely focused in a dark room. And I think that's where I got the idea from. Yeah, when I first come into the studio, when I wake up, I do have a ritual there. So the first thing is I wake up and I'll do some exercise. I think that just sets me up for the day. Nice cup of coffee, light me incense, and then I'll sit and read some quotes. I have my little quotes stuck on the studio, and they kind of inspire me, get me thinking. So my favourite one is the David Bowie one. If you feel safe in the area you're working, you're not working in the right area. Always go a little further in the water than you feel you're capable of being in. Go a little bit out of your depth, and when you don't feel that your feet are quite touching the bottom, you're just about in the right place to do something exciting. I'll just read things like that, and it makes me forget all the work that I've done previously. And every day is a new day, really. I might play my guitar for a bit. So yeah, I'll drink coffee, put some music on, play my guitar, do a bit of exercise, and just wait for my creative passenger to turn up, really, my co-worker, so to speak. I think the most memorable time in my career is when I'd first started drawing again, when I was living in Verona. Because up until then I'd not painted or drawn for 10 years, maybe more than 10 years, because my studio burnt down and I just couldn't deal with the amount of work that I'd lost really. It was something I just did. I thought I'd never paint or draw ever again. I didn't want to think about it. But when I was in Italy and my wife pestered me because we lived above an art material shop every day to start again and just do it for fun. And I think that when I first was going out sketching, which was terrifying, I can remember the actual day when I was sat in front of the arena and I was sketching some architecture and I could feel it come back. This love had come back again, and it was like seeing an old friend again. And I remember in the sun, and I just had this overwhelming feeling that, right, I'm back. I think, yeah, I'm going to give it another go. At 50, I don't know, what was I, 49? Yeah, a lot of people thought I was crazy, but I just knew then. I thought I'm going to go for it again. I think it must mean a lot of different things with different people. For me personally, my biggest success, to be fair, is nothing to do with my art really. It's the point where, because I have children, and I think it was the point where I can inspire my own children that life, it's never too late. And you know, I started my art career again late into my 40s, and I'm not doing it for 10 years. I remember my son saying, "Oh, you know, you're inspiring, Dad. I'm really proud of you." And I'm thinking, if I can inspire my children, for them to understand that do whatever you want and follow your dreams, if I can inspire somebody, that's probably that's success for me anyway. I've got lots of ideas. I can see my work developing in many ways. I can see it all the time, how my work I want to develop. I'm just going to Japan soon, and I've contacted some artists over there, so I'd like to go and visit them and study the way the contemporary calligraphy artists over in Tokyo. I'm going to hopefully go and do some lessons. I'm planning to do some lessons over there. I'd like to do some bigger pieces and almost sculptural pieces, add more colour to my drawings. I'd like to develop my drawing style at the moment because they're quite popular. I kind of visualise these heavier marks mixed with my lighter sort of descriptive marks. So yeah, exciting really. I'm excited about that. Yeah, if I was to give any advice to young artists is don't listen to any criticism of people. Don't take it to heart and just take it as a positive. I mean, I used to, because I'm left-handed, I think my style developed because we had to write with fountain pens, and I used to smudge all my work and all my artwork. I used to get, what's this mess supposed to be? And even in my school art, I used to scribble draw when I was at school, and I used to get, what's this mess supposed to be? And I'm a scribbler. It is good to look at other artists, but don't be intimidated by other artists' work. I think that's a good point. I love lots of different styles of artists. I love artists that is complete graphic or abstract, completely. I know it's nothing like my style, but I always like to take inspiration from them. It's like almost like you take a little bit of a flavour from all these different artists and then create your own recipe with all these different flavours. And you get that really by just experimenting and playing and trying not to put so much emphasis on the end product. I think it's all about enjoying it really and having fun and finding your own style. Yeah, I've been working on this project for the past 2 years. It's a museum in Leicester, and that's been really exciting. Completely different from what I normally do. And a good thing, it's took me out of my comfort zone, and I've been working with other creative people. And that's a Roman museum where they're bringing my drawings to life, and it's a narrative of a young boy who lived in Rome and Leicester. It's going to be projected up. So literally I've done all the illustrations and drawings of all the characters, and that opens in June the 7th, I think, the museum. I've got exhibitions coming up. The publisher just tells me in advance, so I think I've got one coming up in 30th of August at Bluebird Gallery. And I think in June, I'm having a coffee table book written about me, published by Buckingham Fine Art. That's going to be available I think in June as well. And then in the autumn, I'll be going around different galleries promoting the book, I think, as well.
You can catch Scott's artwork in person at the Jury Wall Museum in Leicester from the 26th of July 2025. A little later in the year, Scott also has an exhibition at Bluebird Fine Art Derby, which opens 30th August.